Today's lesson is going to talk about how we can make some changes to our conditional statements. First, let's talk about some shorthand for conditional statements. Remember, P arrow Q means if your hypothesis happens, then your conclusion will happen, or your given, your conjecture. That's our shorthand. Sometimes we want to negate a statement, or say a statement is not going to happen. For example, if it is raining outside, then I am not going to take my sons to the park. That would be an example of negating a statement, or using the word not. The symbol for not something is this little tilde. It's just the little squiggle. It's kind of like the squiggle that is right above our congruent symbol. So if I wanted to say that something is not going to happen, I would say not P with this symbol. Example, the negation of it is raining is it is not raining. So if my conditional was P, this would be not P. Now, let's look at some shorthand of what our alternatives are. If my conditional statement states that if P happens, then Q will happen, we have three new types of conditionals, or adjustments to our conditional. We have the inverse of the original statement, the converse of the original statement, and the contrapositive of the original statement. Now, they all three do something different and have the possibility of changing the value of truth to your conditional. By that I mean my conditional statement could be true, whereas my inverse is not true, and my converse is true. All of those have their own specific truth values. Symbolically, I would state that negate the conditional means I'm going to keep the order of my conditional, P, then Q, but I'm negating both statements. So this is saying not P. If P does not happen, then not Q. That means Q will not happen. The converse, it says just reverse the conditional. So instead of P then Q, I say Q then P. Now I have a new hypothesis. My new hypothesis was the original conclusion. If it is raining, then the grass gets wet. I now flip it. If the grass gets wet, then it is raining. So I'm flipping the hypothesis conclusion. The contrapositive, I do both things. I flip the hypothesis conclusion and I negate both of them. So that's what we're looking at with our symbols. Now let's look at the first example of that. If it is the 4th of July, it is the 4th of July being P, then it is a holiday, Q. So my inverse, we said, is not P then not Q. So my symbols I'll put over here as a way to remind me of what I'm doing. Well, that means negate your original hypothesis. So I would change this to if it is not the 4th of July, comma, then I also have to negate my original conclusion. It is not a holiday. So we're not looking to rewrite our sentences completely. We're not looking to reword. We're literally adding the word not when I have to negate something. Now let's talk real quick about truth values. If it is the 4th of July, then it is a holiday. That's true. The 4th of July, then holiday. Yes. But if it's not the 4th of July, then it is not a holiday. This is false. So we can see already it has a different truth value. I can come up with plenty of days that are not the 4th of July, but it's still a holiday. January 1st. January 1st is not the 4th of July, but it is a holiday. So this is true, this is false. The conjecture is false. My inverse is false. Next, let's look at the converse. This is where we flip my original hypothesis and conclusion. So instead of it is the 4th of July as my hypothesis, I have it is a holiday as my hypothesis. Then it is the 4th of July as my conclusion. Again, truth value. It is a holiday. It is the 4th of July. That's also false. Again, I can use the same counterexample. It is a holiday, Labor Day or New Year's Day. Then it is the 4th of July. Both of those examples were holidays that are not the 4th of July. My converse of this conditional is false. The last one we have to write is our contrapositive. This one can be tricky sometimes. We negate my original conclusion, then negate my original hypothesis. So I say that if it is not, because I am negating, a holiday, comma, then it is not the 4th of July. Period. That's my contrapositive. Now this one can be harder to think of. When we start negating things, the logic of it starts getting a little bit more complicated. If I'm trying to determine a truth value here, I need to come up with a day that is not a holiday. And then it is not the 4th of July. Well, the only way for this to be false is if it is the 4th of July. But the 4th of July is a holiday. So there's no way I can come up with a day that's not a holiday that is the 4th of July. So there is no counterexample to this. That's a true statement. So in this case, my conditional was true and my contrapositive were true. But my inverse and converse were both false. That's not always the pattern you'll see. So you do have to check the truth values of all of them. Alright, I want you guys to get practice on your own. First, rewrite, well, together we will rewrite this statement in conditional form, P then Q. Points that lie on the same line are collinear. So we can say that if points lie on the same line, then they are collinear. Is that true or false? Well, points are on the same line, then they are collinear. That shouldn't have said linen. Yeah, that is a true conditional. What I want you guys to do first is write the inverse, converse, and contrapositive of this, but be careful. When I am writing something like the converse, I can't flip it and say if they are collinear. I still have to define what they are before I can use that word. So I would want to say if the points are collinear, then they lie on the same line. So I just gave you the converse. Go ahead and make sure you get that written down. Write the inverse and the contrapositive as well, and then unpause to check your work. Okay, so let's check. Inverse should say that if the points do not lie on the same line, then they are not collinear. I've negated both my hypothesis and conclusion. Converse we already talked about. I switch them. If the points are collinear, then they lie on the same line. In the contrapositive, I negate the converse. The points are not collinear, then they do not lie on the same line. Why don't you go ahead and see if you can come up with truth values for all three of those. So again, press pause and then decide, is the inverse true or false? If it's false, remember you need a counter example. Press pause and then we'll talk about it when you're done. Okay, so hopefully you figured this out. In this case, all four statements are true. There is no counter example to my inverse saying that the points do not lie on the same line, then they are not collinear. That's a true statement. So is my converse. Points are collinear, they lie on the same line. True statement. And my contrapositive is also true. If the points are not collinear, then they do not lie on the same line. Our next video, we're going to just take that to one extra step and start talking about something we call biconditionals. And biconditionals will have to deal with our conditional statements, our converse statements, plus our truth values for those statements. So go ahead and move on to our page 2 video.